closed caption option. So we've spoken before about what are called the four great endeavors in Buddhism. These four overarching guides that help us move towards more ease and peace in our lives. And just to remind us, the four endeavors advise us to practice to prevent the arising of unskillful endeavors. And if they're present, to learn to abandon unskillful endeavors, to encourage the arising of skillful endeavors, and if they're around, to learn to maintain skillful endeavors. Each of these takes a certain energy. They require perseverance, determination, even courage. And these are the various qualities of virya, which is the parami that we're discussing this month. The way I think about these endeavors is that the first two, which are regarding unskillful ways, ask for a certain restraint in our behavior. While the second two, which are about skillful means, are encouragement to move us forward. They're two different facets of virya and two different kinds of energy. And they're both necessary as we progress on this path. So I wonder just for a minute if you can feel the difference. Encouragement is nurturing, and it has a movement towards it, towards what's of benefit. It might feel light and even have a little uplift to it. While restraint has a holding back, a sense of controlling or reining something in, and a movement away from what's harmful. These are different, but they're not totally separate paths. We don't actually choose to do just one and not the other. And if we think about it, they feed each other. As we get a taste of what's wholesome and what feels good, we're encouraged, and that generates some energy. And it inspires us to want to restrain from those other less skillful practices. So in the first few weeks of this month, since we've been talking about virya, we've been mostly talking about the energy we need to practice, what it takes within us to come back to the cushion every day. It's the gathering and the balancing of our energies so that we're able to move towards kind of more wholesome and skillful lives. And this is in the realm of encouraging energy. So today, I want to spend a little bit more time looking more closely at the energy of restraint. It flows so clearly from the previous paramis that we've been discussing. We've discussed ethics and the 5 precepts, and then renunciation, that letting go, and then wisdom. And each of these points us in the direction to hold back from things that cause harm to ourselves and to others. Sometimes restraint is imposed on us by laws, because even society knows that there are some things that need to be restrained in order for us to live peacefully together. There are laws against killing, stealing, speeding. But there are other behaviors that take a lot of discernment on our part. They're not against the law, but they also can cause us and others harms. We each know what those behaviors are for ourselves. We've talked about them a lot over the past months. Maybe it's the tendency to lose ourselves scrolling on our phone or on the TV, Maybe it's the slightly cruel, judgmental ways that we talk to ourselves or we talk to others. Maybe it's the to-do list that really drives us through our day. It's all the ways that we might switch it kind of into automatic without much mindfulness. The ways we distract, deny, hurt ourselves, and that keep us from seeing more clearly the way things really are. Learning restraint in all these circumstances takes a lot of practice. And at least in my experience, there are a lot of mistakes along the way. And that's absolutely part of the process. I wonder if you remember when buffets were a popular thing. I don't think they are as much now, or at least I don't frequent them. But in the day, they were really popular. The all-you-can-eat $10 buffet. Great, let's do it. There would be a long table with a huge variety of delicious looking foods to try. Everything looked good. Everything was a temptation. And when I went to a buffet, of course, I wanted to try a little bit of everything, especially because it was the same price, no matter how much I got. And I wanted to get my money's worth. So even if I only took a spoonful of each dish, by the time I sat down to eat, my plate was like overflowing, full. And I ate it. And then if something was especially tasty, I might go back for more because I could. And then there was the dessert table. So many more things to try. So you might say that my eyes were bigger than my stomach. In my mind, a buffet is really an invitation to learn, to know deeply what unleashed desire, what giving into temptation feels like. And it doesn't feel very good. I would inevitably leave the restaurant feeling terrible. I'd feel logy, really full. I'd have a dulled mind. And I would promise myself I would never do that again. But I did. I can't count the number of times that I did something like this. It could have been at a buffet. Maybe it was Thanksgiving. It might even have been when I was alone in the evening at home and feeling kind of lonely. It took me a long time until I was cognizant enough to remember before I began, oh yeah, I'm not going to feel well afterwards. And then I'll be mad at myself, which just makes me feel worse. I was just beginning to see cause and effect. It took many tries to really be willing to see that clearly, to finally get it, that reining in my desires actually might make me happier. You know, unfortunately, the ability to restrain does depend on our recognizing the pain that our habits cause us. It's not something we can easily practice without having learned what it feels like to not restrain. I liken our minds to teenagers, defying the advice given by their parents in order to find out for themselves, right? We can't be told not to eat too much. We have to experience it. We have to feel how it hurts and it's not satisfying. And it doesn't move us towards less harm and more ease. And this is true for any of our habits. Sometimes I joke that these are lessons I have to learn many, many times before my behavior even begins to change. And the good thing is, I think for all of us, is that we have innumerable opportunities to try again. We all do. Life just keeps offering them up. So we don't have to regret the poor decision we made before. We just need to be maybe a little more awake the next time it comes around. When we are able to find within us a moment of restraint, as Susan always says, we need to give ourselves a big star. But unfortunately, with these kind of habits, it's not a once and done. It takes a persevering, persistent energy. Our minds will circle back over and over to whatever behavior we restrained from. And our resolve will be challenged over and over. For those of you who might not resonate with this, I apologize, but I feel like food is just such a relatable example when I speak about these things, when I speak about restraint. So we may restrain from the cookie that's sitting in our cupboard in one moment, and that's great. And then, as I say, the cookie continues to speak to me. It's like tapping me on the shoulder to remind me of its presence. And so I have to keep conjuring up the energy to resist again and again. In more psychological terms, it's really a delayed gratification. I'm foregoing a perceived pleasure in this moment for a greater pleasure later. And what is this greater pleasure? It's the fruits of our practice. It's the stillness and the spaciousness, the clarity and contentedness that comes from that restraint. We have to keep reminding ourselves of our intentions and aspirations as a way to strengthen that energy of restraint. And sometimes it's helpful to remember that we're not just letting go of an unskillful habit, but also letting go into something else, something better, something much more fulfilling. So, can we taste and feel the pleasure of this in our lives? When we do, even for a few moments, as Ajahn Sucitto says, temptation finally disappears. We're so clear how good it feels to restrain that we're no longer tempted. It's sweeter, really, than any cookie could be. So that's really an aspiration. Maybe it's at first only in a few moments, but there is offered to us the possibility through practice of finding a way in which we can sustain this sweetness. And we all know that these kinds of changes come slowly to us. And so the question is, how can we be firm in our practice of restraint and also kind and patient and understanding of ourselves? We know too well how we can layer dukkha on top of dukkha. And that's not what we want to do. Joseph Goldstein, for himself, he whispers, "Not now," quietly to himself when his mind moves towards an unskillful path. I really like this. It's kind of like the adage from Alcoholics Anonymous. They say one day at a time. We don't do very well when we say we will never eat too much. We will never watch TV. But we can say that we choose to not do it in this moment. Not now. Right? Just not now. This is all we can ask of ourselves. And that feels kind and firm, both. You know, just this morning, I was sitting on my porch listening to the birds, which I love to do at this time of year. And I'm enjoying my garden, and my mind immediately moved to all the tasks that I could see out there in front of me that needed to be done. There was weeding and planting and watering. And for me, that's that habitual to-do list that was just started spinning in my head. It was really familiar to me. And it was really taking me away from appreciating the beauty that was right there in front of me. So I had to restrain myself. Not now. Not in this moment. Just enjoy. So let's see what happens tomorrow, but not now. Thank you all. And let's practice. Maybe a couple deep breaths and bringing ourselves and our attention into our bodies. Remembering that we're sitting in this place, in this space. And that really the way we do bring ourselves into presence is through this body. So offer it what it might need right now in order to be most comfortable, most relaxed and alert. And as that feels complete for you, slowly bring yourself into relative stillness. We're never going to be totally still. There's going to be aliveness in us, moving through us. But we come with the intention of settling and quieting. First, our bodies. And letting the quietness in our bodies encourage our minds also to quiet. Letting the mind settle as well. Perhaps settling on the breath, resting so lightly on the rise and fall, and rising again. And perhaps reflecting for a few moments now at the beginning of the sit on your intentions and your aspirations. as a means to gather your energies, to really commit to being present for these minutes. feel the newness of this moment and this moment, each one arising, never having arisen before. Welcome all of it with fresh eyes, open arms. If you notice the mind becoming a little casual, getting drifty, getting lost into thought, see if you can restrain for just this moment and then replace your attention on your breath and your body. Just now, in this moment. In the last minutes of this sitting, perhaps returning again to reflect on your intentions and your aspirations for practice. Most likely, it's probably not just to be clear on the cushion, but to hopefully have this kind of clarity spread out into your life. And so just resting on that as we transition off the cushion and into the rest of the day. Thank you all for being here, for practicing with